Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hockey Raiders first round playoff series previews. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with the HockeyRaiders.com. We're going to be kicking things off here with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning, simply because this is the only first round matchup that we have solidified so far. And we've got two distinguished writers here from the Hockey Raiders with us, Peter Baracchini and Jim Bay. Peter, how you doing?
Doing great, and like you said, season's winding down. The season that coming in, everyone was talking about like, oh, what's going to happen with the playoffs with the Maple Leafs? Regular season doesn't mean nothing. Well, regular season is now at the end, and now it's time. It's time to see what the Maple Leafs can do right about now.
Well, everybody's curious to see what the Maple Leafs are going to do because this is kind of a make or break year for them, I think, right? If they don't manage to get themselves out of the first round, which they haven't been able to do, I don't want to say it because Maple Leafs fans are going to lose their mind when they hear it, but since 2004,
rightfully so,
right? Yeah, so this is kind of an important one for them. Jim is also with us. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing today?
Very good. Very good. Looking forward to this one. This is a repeat series from last year, so it's kind of a chance for Toronto to sort of rebound and see if they can't get over that hump against Tampa, but these two teams have been evenly matched. Before I'll go to you, Jim, first, but let's give a little bit of history about what happened with these two teams during the regular season. So they've only played twice. As we record this, they're going to be playing again this evening, so that'll be their third matchup of the year. Toronto, it's pretty evenly matched. Toronto's got a win and an overtime loss, so they've kind of edged out Tampa in the regular series so far. Goals are pretty even. I think it's 7 for the Tampa Bay Lightning and like 5 for Toronto. So it's pretty evenly matched in that respect. Both teams have really heavy stars up front, lots of big names on their roster. Pretty even matchup. Jim, I'll start with you. What have you seen so far between these two teams and specifically Tampa Bay when it comes to their regular season?
Well, with the regular season, Tampa Bay's had a lot of ups and downs. I think they're definitely starting to feel the effects of having multiple playoff seasons, long, deep runs in the playoffs, lots of games, and a roster that's a little bit up there in hockey age, let's so to speak. Far be it from me to talk about somebody's age, but and I think in this case, you've seen a lot of highs and lows. Which has led to, for example, Tampa Bay having a sub 500 record on the road for the first time in about 10 years, which is, something that's also a little concerning considering that, they're going to play, if it goes 7, they're going to play, 4 games in Toronto. So that's going to be something that they're going to have to deal with. And, they're coming off a 3-game losing streak that came from a 3-game winning streak that was preceded by a 5-game losing streak. So they're kind of coming into the end of the year at a very interesting kind of way. And they have a couple of games to kind of turn it around and start getting that, kind of Lightning playoff feel that they've taken in for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you're at all concerned about their 3-7-0 record in the last 10 games here, because Toronto, it's not like they've been lighting it on fire, but they are 6-2-2 heading into this thing. A win tonight, even though a lot of the rosters are kind of all over the place this evening, would probably really kind of hammer home the idea here that Toronto's going in on a roll and Tampa's kind of struggling. Does that concern you at all heading into the playoffs, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, kind of like in one of the losses, like last week against the Islanders coming off their back-to-back, they sat out a lot of guys. There was a couple guys that got banged up from that very rugged Rangers game. And, that Elliott played instead of Vasilevsky, Hagel and a couple other regular starters sat down. They went short, just like Toronto's doing tonight. So I think, winning is, something that's not relevant, but playing well and starting to play, Tampa Bay hockey, tight checking, very physical, good defense is something that they really start needing to establish tonight, take it into Thursday in Detroit, and then they can hit the playoffs running.
Peter, what about you? What do you see from the Maple Leafs this year? Like, it seems to be that they're the odds-on favorite going in. They've got the better record. They're at like minus 150 betting favorite, whereas Tampa Bay's at plus 125. So most people have Toronto winning, but they've struggled in the playoffs. Tampa Bay has took them out last year in 7 games. It was a pretty tight series till the end there when Vasilevsky could have took over. But Toronto is and has been the better team this season. They're going in a little bit more of a role. Now they're sitting a lot of their lineup tonight. But what have you seen from Toronto heading into the season? Like, is this the year where you think now Toronto is definitely the favorite? They're probably the team that's going to come out of this first round matchup.
I mean, in my head, yes. I mean, obviously, you would like, based on paper, based on what's happening in the standings and this season, yeah, Toronto is definitely the better team. But, as we've seen in past experience, whether it's going up against the Boston Bruins or the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Maple Leafs seem to have struggled in the past and trying to exercise those demons and try and overcome those lapses that have led to failures in the playoffs. And obviously it started off at the end of last season where they traded off Peter Mrazek, they let Jack Campbell walk, and they brought in Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov. Big risk, but it looks like it's paying off, especially with Samsonov. And then you added in some quality depth pieces like Calle Yarncroke, Zach Aston-Reese. You had a massive deadline bringing in, top six forward, a top pairing defenseman right now with McCabe playing really well with TJ Brody, Sam Lafferty, Luke Shen. I mean, this is a team that is all in it to win it. They're going all in. And, at the beginning of the season, there was a lot riding on this because of what has happened in the past. Dubas doesn't have a contract, no extension. I think Keefe has one more year on his. So this is essentially do or die for this team. And, throughout the season, obviously the main headline has been the star players, are they going to be consistent? And lo and behold, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, who everyone is sort of kind of written off as, regressing because of his age and the seasons that he's had previously before. And William Nylander, all of them are producing very well. So if anything, the star players are going to be at the forefront this time around, just like they were last season. I really think that if they need to be successful, they're going to have to be relying on them pretty heavily like they have all season. And granted, Mitch Marner is being rested tonight, so no 100-point season for one game until they possibly insert him in for the New York Rangers, but it's probably the right move. You want this team to be rested. You want them to be mentally focused and prepared because of what happened last time. And yeah, the Maple Leafs were the favorites last season in the playoffs, and now they're the favorites right now. Is luck going to change for them? We'll see, but it's really difficult because, like we said, it's always a different story in the regular season compared to the playoffs. Great success in the regular season. Playoffs, that's where they need to shine, as what I said off the top of the show. They need to show it right now, but this is probably the best and most complete team that I've seen with the Maple Leafs since the Matthews era began, where you have depth and quality pieces to be competitive down and throughout the whole entire lineup.
Yeah, they're definitely a deeper team than they have been in the past. My only concern, I suppose, would be the goaltending. We're going to get into the players to watch here in a second, and I'm going to come to you, Jim, as we start that segment. But I do want to ask you, Peter, this last question. How much is the pressure of getting past this first round? Because it's been year upon year upon year upon year. How much does that weigh into this team now?
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, every single time in the playoffs where especially in the last 3-4 years that I've been at the Hockey Writers, I've always said they need to channel the past failures and use that to their advantage, kind of like what other teams have passed. I know Tampa Bay has gone through their struggles and they finally got over the hump and channeled the failures for that. The Washington Capitals, years of playoff failure, and then they managed to win a cup as well. Is this the time for the Maple Leafs to actually channel the failures, actually kind of had that, get mad attitude after what has happened in the past? Because we've seen time and time again how disheveled and how, this team can be, especially in a hard loss, especially when you look at the playoff bubble where they lose to the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, in that all or nothing, you see Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, they're alone in the stall in the locker room, looking very frustrated. And then you have what happened last season again. It's just failure after failure. But now this is on the players ultimately to try and decide how they want this to play out. Do they want to try and have that same feeling like they've had the past 6-7 seasons? Or is this a time where they actually move on and actually show that they can compete and prove that, these last 7 years, it'll work out in the long run? Because I think if they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, obviously we talk about the Boston Bruins and how great they have been. I think the Maple Leafs are one of, if not 2 or 3 of many teams that can give the Bruins a run for their money based on, regular season success and how well they've managed to match up against them. So if they win this series, I think this is going to boost their momentum and it's going to help them in the long run for sure.
I am very curious to see if this motivates the Maple Leafs or weighs on the Maple Leafs. In my opinion, would be we'll know right away. If the Maple Leafs jump out to an early lead, I think they're in good shape. But if they let the series stretch on, I think it leans towards Tampa as it has in the past. Jim, let's move over to talking about some of the players to watch. Obviously in Tampa, Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos. Those are the names that we all know really well. Are those the players that you're looking at in this series, or are there other names? Tanner Jeannot, who's not going to be starting because he was injured, but is supposed to come back during the first round at some point here. Who are you looking at specifically for the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Well, as you mentioned, Braden Point, because for most of their playoff run last year, they didn't have Braden Point. And they're a different team without him, and it didn't really catch up with them until the Colorado series. So Point is going to have to continue doing. He had an excellent regular season. He's going to have to continue that to take the pressure off of Kucherov and Stamkos. And I think that's been a lot of what happens this year is everybody is looking at those two guys, whether it's on the power play or whether they're on a line together. And Point has really taken advantage of that opportunity, and he's going to need to against Toronto or anybody else if they're going to have any kind of success. Another guy that I think is going to be very important this year is Brandon Hagel. He does so many little things outside of scoring. He's a great forechecker. He's a pain in the backside for the opposition. In both ends of the ice. Last year, he had his little growing pains coming in after the trade. He didn't quite gel and get with the team as quickly as he would have liked to. He even said so in the fall. But he's going to be a really important player to kind of stir things up, get things going, create turnovers, and help them out that way. And then the other one's going to be Nick Paul. I think we kind of know what happened, in Game 7 last year with Nick Paul. And, when they got him from Ottawa last year, the big thing was his game is built for the playoffs. He's that kind of player like Hagel, who can create and make things happen. Didn't have a great regular season, had some, stretches where he didn't, score many goals or get many points, but he's another guy who's going to have, an impact on both sides of the ice, and is somebody who can, create plays and when need to create offense. And he's definitely going to have to do that if they have any kind of chance against the Maple Leafs this year.
I do want to ask you before we move over to Peter for this one. What did you make of the Tanner Jeannot trade, the price paid to get him, and what happens if he comes in a little late to the series and isn't a huge impact for Tampa Bay? How do you view that trade?
I thought the price was way too high. I think 5 draft picks was way too high for him. I think with the injury, depending on how it comes, I think you're not going to be able to get any kind of value, even if Tampa loses in the first round. It's just going to be, impossible to say it wasn't worth it or it was worth it. But I said, and I wrote from the very beginning, that the price was too high. I think it would be, if he comes back healthy enough to contribute, again, whether he skates on the third or fourth line, his physical presence is going to be, a really big, boost for them if he can get in there and play to that point. But as far as the trade goes, I think with the injury and everything, we can't really, judge it on that, no matter what happens, unless they get a deeper run in the playoffs. He's going to have more games in order to whether we can actually justify the cost of that or not.
Yeah, no, that's fair for sure. Peter, you mentioned a couple names earlier when you talked about some of the players that you're watching. Are you kind of keeping an eye on the stars, on the depth, on the goaltending? Where is your focus for this first round series?
Yeah, for me, the stars would be obviously the easy answer for the whole entire thing. I could pick, Mitch Marner, Matthews, and Tavares. But, for all the criticism that they got last season about how they need to perform well in the playoffs, all 4 of them played pretty well in the playoffs. So I'm expecting them to have a big season or big playoff repeat this time around as well. But I'm going to pick 3 different players. And one of them is obviously going to be Ilya Samsonov. Because of the injury to Matt Murray, it looked like he was running away with the starter role after the trade deadline, but because of the injury, it was definitely Samsonov's right then and there. And the numbers that he had this season is absolutely phenomenal compared to what he had last season with the Washington Capitals, and his 5-on-5 save percentage, 8th overall in the league at 927. But the biggest one for me was his high danger save percentage at 901. That's better than Igor Shesterkin. That's better than Linus Ullmark, and that's better than Andrei Vasilevsky this season. So considering the play style that the Tampa Bay Lightning plays, they're very quick on the cycle, hard on the forecheck, and they like to get as many pucks in on net and into the high danger area as much as possible. Samsonov improving in that area is going to be very huge. And if he's able to replicate that success in the regular season, from the regular season into the playoffs, I think he's going to be very key in that regard. The other one is definitely going to be Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, the championship pedigree that he had from the St. Louis Blues. I'm even going to throw Noel Acciari in there as well. I'm going to combine the two together because they both have the experience, especially with Acciari. The Maple Leafs are very familiar with him with their days in the playoffs against when they played the Boston Bruins. So to have that, two-way play and leadership and experience with O'Reilly, plus that same experience with Acciari, but the physical two-way play as well. The in-your-face style, the blocking of the shots, everything. He could do it all. Both of them will do whatever it takes to win. So I think having that mentality is going to help them forward. And the other one for me is kind of a bit of a surprise for me, but I wrote about it as well. And that's going to be Michael Bunting, because we know recently how he hasn't gotten the calls and favors with the referees. And there was that whole thing where every single time he draws a penalty, it seems like everything that he gets, every single time he tries to draw a penalty, they get one. But if he retaliates back, they're going to book him for that because, I guess the refs have had it with his antics and everything like that. And that's fine. But at this point right now, he needs to keep everything in check, just walk away and stir the pot a little bit, but not cross the line, because he is going to be in that top 6 for sure. They're going to rely on him to get on the forecheck, create havoc in front of the net as well, and just be a pest. I know a lot of players don't like him. A lot of fans don't like him, but he's the type of player that thrives in the playoffs. And if he needs to be successful, he needs to keep his game in check and still produce, but still chip in every now and then. So those to me are my 3+1 that I'm looking forward to watching in the playoffs. That'll be key.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Michael Bunting, actually. Between the two teams, that's the player I'm kind of most watching. One, from a Toronto perspective, because if he can be an impact player for them, that's quite a difference maker. Plus, he's going to be maybe the biggest free agent in the summertime, and this is an important series for him to have. But also from a Tampa Bay perspective, I'm wondering if the Lightning come in and try to put him on tilt immediately. If they target him and see if they can't take him off of his game, that could really shift things and completely remove his impact from the series. And if that happens, then that's really going to be an interesting storyline, because I don't know where that series will shift and if it's enough to shift the series one way or the other. But I am watching that. Jim, I'll come back to you. Keys to victory for Tampa Bay. Is there something here, one or two things that you're kind of looking at that goes, if this goes Tampa's way, I believe this is probably going to be the series that they can take here?
The first thing they have to do is cut down on turnovers. And anytime, the times that they've had in a losing streak, they've had a ton of turnovers. They just don't take care of the puck well in either end. It has led to a lot of odd man rushes. They were among the league leaders. I haven't checked recently because fortunately it hasn't happened in giving up shorthanded goals. And that's really been a big deal for them this year. So they really have to, cut down on the turnovers. And as you were talking about earlier with the high danger chances, when they are on their losing streak, they give up a ton of high danger chances in their own end. And, you could have Vasilevsky, whoever back there, but when you give up that many, no goaltender is going to be able to do the best that they can do in those situations, let alone, steal a game, for you, which you need, a couple of times in a 7-game playoff series.
Peter, what about you? Keys to victory for the Maple Leafs. Is there something that stands out to finally get over this hump?
It's interesting because one of them I agree with the Maple Leafs is turnovers and puck management, because the Maple Leafs defense has been prone to that in the past, and especially throughout the season. I know a lot is going to be placed on, players like Justin Hall, Morgan Riley, and how sometimes their puck management and play with the puck hasn't been quite as well. So I think they need to manage that a little bit better. But for me, I think it's going to be actually maybe finding a weakness to Andrei Vasilevsky's game. And recently, in their game against the New York Rangers, he gave up 3 goals, and most of them were on his blocker side. And even looking back to the postseason, I was looking through and I saw Mike McKenna post some stats about how his glove or mid to high blocker side shots save percentage is .801, and that was in the 2022 playoffs. So that was last season. So I even looked back in one of the clips, and one of the goals that Andrei Vasilevsky gave up in game 1 was a breakaway goal to David Kampf, and that goal ended up on his blocker side. So I think if the Maple Leafs want to have some success and maybe actually find the book on Vasilevsky, throw everything blocker side, because that appears to be his weakness. But then again, we know how well he plays in the big moments. You can't take that for granted. You just got to pepper him with shots and get traffic in front, because you want to make his life miserable. If he's seeing that puck, he is on top of his game, and it's going to be lights out for the Maple Leafs. So they need to get to him, expose that weakness, and make sure that he can't see the puck or track it at all.
Peter, I'll stick with you before I go back to Jim on this one. And you both talked a little bit about, turnovers and high danger chances, things like that. Is there a weakness that you're worried about with Toronto? Like, is there something that you're thinking, man, they got to get this sorted out if they're going to stand a chance here?
Staying healthy. I mean, I think that's the obvious one right now. I mean, we're seeing that with Matt Murray. Samsonov is dealing with some bumps and bruises right now. That way he's staying out and his season's basically shut down. Yarncroke is coming back. Lafferty was dealing with something. So I think they just want everybody to stay healthy, because this is going to be this is the long run and the playoff run that they want to have. And they need everybody to be 100% on track and no issues bothering them. And I think that's going to be key for them. Obviously, I think defensively is going to be a factor as well, because over their last 8 games or so, I think they've only given up more than 3 goals, only 1. So they have been playing better defensively in their own end. They just need to maintain that consistency, because that has been a big factor all season, where they go for a stretch of games where they're very strong defensively and hard to, get pucks on net, and the goals against are going to be difficult for the team, their opposition, to get. But then there are stretches where it's kind of opposite and they lose their footing off the gas. So I think they just need to maintain that as well.
I'll ask you before I move over to Jim here, do you think that the Maple Leafs are built to last? You talk about their health already going into the first round of the series. What about their health throughout an entire playoff series? We've not seen them have to do it, right? So we don't know, one, if they can manage through the first series without getting hurt, and if they're already going in injured, that's a question mark. But what happens if they do get out of this first round? Like, are they built big enough, physical enough, able to withstand the rigors of the playoffs?
Very good question, because we haven't seen this, because it's always 6 or 7 games or 7 games and then they're out. So I am hoping that they are built for this run, because of the fact that they did get names like Jake McCabe. They did get Luke Shen. They did get Noel Acciari to try and, bulk up physically and make sure that they are ready for the likes of the Lightning, the Bruins, and the physicality that's coming ahead of them. But if there is an injury that happens, they do have some personnel waiting in the wings. I mean, they do have Wayne Simmons, although he doesn't have, a lot of, or he's only gotten, I believe, 18 games this season. He still knows his ropes around the playoffs and what it takes to win. With his physicality, he's not afraid to drop the gloves and get involved with, mixing it up with the opposition. So there's him. There's also, Matthew Nice, who was called up. There's that added, physicality, but skill that he has in his power forward like game. You do have some players, but then again, it's more so experience, where they have the skill and the smarts. It's just, can they replicate that? Because I just mentioned Nice. Is Pontus Holmberg going to be a name that they can rely on? Nick Abruzzese, a lot of names that they have in the system that they can call up, or could be waiting in the wings should an injury happen. But they only have about 12 players or so that are built for this long run. So we'll see what can happen and see who can step up in the event that does happen.
Jim, I'll shift over to you. One of the things that I'm interested in seeing is if Tampa Bay, because if no one's played more hockey than the Tampa Bay Lightning in the last few seasons, and I do wonder if that has had a little bit of an effect on them this year, just because of anybody, they should probably be more tired than any other team, and all these players. Is that what you're worried about going into this, or is there another weakness that you're kind of concerned about or worry that you have heading into the series?
That's definitely one of them. I think, Vasilevsky, you're talking about his blocker side. And I think a lot of what happened last year is A lot of people who know a lot more about goaltending than I do were saying he was late getting over to the blocker side too, that he seemed slow in doing that. So even last year, he was tired. I think they did a little bit different job this year in with his workload. And he's one of many who has played a lot of hockey. They also played a lot of hockey after the All-Star break too. There was the snowstorm in Buffalo that gave them another game. They went through almost every weekend in March with back-to-back games, and they didn't do well the second time on the back-to-backs. That'll be interesting to see when the schedule comes out, if that is the case, where they have, back-to-back games. I know it's a rarity, but sometimes depending on, the availability of arenas and TV, of course, and everything like that, whether that happens. So that's a huge concern. There's a lot of guys on that team who have played a lot of games, and as I mentioned earlier, who are getting up there in years. Another thing that's going to be interesting to watch and is a little worrisome is the possibility that the Lightning are going to start two rookies on defense, and Nick Perbix and Darren Radish. They have both played very well this year since being called up. They have, some experience with, AHL playoff experience. Perbix was in the Frozen Four a couple of years ago, played in the Olympics. It's not the NHL playoffs, and it's definitely not in Toronto either. I think it's pretty safe to say that that's a reasonably unique experience, the playoffs in Toronto. The expectations, as you guys have talked about going in, and, the difficulties that they've had. So it'll be interesting with some of their defensive troubles, how well these guys play under pressure, because there's not really, too much behind them. They have Hayden Fleury, Bedrosian hasn't played a lot. They might be, managing his load. So to be curious to see how those two guys react under the playoff pressure.
Yeah, for me, if I had to pick a weakness in this series, maybe a question mark, not so much a weakness because he's played really well. And you've mentioned him already, Peter, is Samsonov. If he suffers an injury, knock on wood that doesn't happen, or he has a couple rough games, the Maple Leafs don't really have another option. They've got a bunch of people on their roster, but they don't really have anybody to take that spot. And if that happens, and I'm in Edmonton, and I've seen this when we did our run in 2006 when Rolison went hurt. I mean, it changes the entire thing, right?
Yeah,
like that's just,
it does.
So that's a concern for me when it comes to Toronto. They just don't have the backups that they might need should something happen there. Jim, I'm going to stick with you. I'm going to ask you to give me one bold prediction and one not so bold prediction. So for people watching, bold or listening, bold prediction, something that you think is not very obvious that others wouldn't think of. It's kind of like that thing that you're watching in the back of your mind going, people are talking about this, but it could be a factor. And then obviously a not so bold one is something probably pretty obvious that you expect from the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Well, my bold predictions kind of go the other way. There's just, just a feeling that, this may be the end for Tampa Bay. So, my first pick is going to say, going to be Toronto in 5.
Wow.
It just really, unless something happens in a week, there's just really a feeling that I've had about this year. There's a lot of things that seem to be piling up. That could be impacted. It could be wrong. They could flip the switch, which leads to my other prediction is the Lightning in 7. And I've said this in every series that I did these previews last year. And I think it's Toronto's benefit to do it in 5 or 6. The Lightning are like vampires. You got to drive a stake in their heart to kill them. If you let them linger around and you get into a game 7, that's just going to be too tough. Even at home, even in Toronto, we saw it last year. They just have that winning pedigree that, lends itself to, coming through it, big at the right times.
Yeah, I had mentioned it earlier in the video, and I think the same thing. I think if this goes to 7 games, this is like a 90% in Tampa's corner here. I think that's how that's going to go. Peter, what about you? A bold prediction and a not so bold prediction for Toronto.
Yeah, bold prediction. I'm going to say Noel Acciari is going to score a very important or a series clinching goal for the Maple Leafs, mainly because of the fact that he's been kind of a Leaf killer in the past with the Bruins, but now he's on this team right now. He's already made a significant impact, being hard, like I mentioned before, being hard on the forecheck, blocking shots, and even transitioning well in that new look for if he's going to be on that third line with O'Reilly and whoever's going to be the other left wing, be it Calle Yarncroke, Alex Kerfoot. Achari's going to make his presence felt no matter what. And we've seen him score a couple of key goals already as a Maple Leaf during the regular season. So I think right now, if there's looking for like an underrated unsung hero, I think Achari could be that player. And I'm thinking that he could score a big goal for them during the series. Not so bold. Austin Matthews is going to lead the series in scoring for the Maple Leafs. I mean, it's already a given how he's already reached the 40 goal mark again this season. It's absolutely amazing what he could do with his shot, his release, and his accuracy. And, everyone, and like I said, everyone was talking about, Austin Matthews has gone quiet before, but last season in the playoffs, he wasn't quiet at all. He made his presence felt. So I think he's going to do the same thing again this year.
If I'm going to have to pick a bold prediction, and this is really going out there with this one, I wonder if Vasilevsky really shows up, and I'm going to predict 2 shutouts for Vasilevsky in this series. I think he's got the ability to shut down Toronto, and for whatever reason, Toronto, they score a lot of goals, but not necessarily against Tampa. So I do think that could be a factor. Not so bold. I do believe that in the games that he does not shut them down completely, these could be very high scoring affairs. I think you're going to see a lot of goals for both teams, and the Stars are going to step up, and you're going to see a lot of that. Jim, who is your MVP pick for the series? And you can go Tampa or you can go Toronto. I don't care which team you pick, but if you had to pick an MVP for this series, who would you pick?
I'm going to pick an MVP because I think if I prediction that Toronto is going to be right, it's going to have to be Samsonov. Granted that he's going to be healthy. I think, with what you have skating in front of him, I think you're going to get, what you're going to get from them. And I think they're going to do what you think they are, but it's going to have to be Samsonov. That's going to have to be the MVP if they want to get to the next round.
Peter, who for you? Do you have an MVP that you're kind of watching?
It's got to be Mitch Marner for me. The offense was going through him all season long, no matter if he was on the first line or the second line, and same thing in the postseason last year. It's amazing what again, kind of like with Matthews, these are 2 highly skilled and highly gifted players, but the way that Marner, dances with the puck in the offensive zone, generates chances, draws opponents in, and frees up space for his teammates. He's going to be a lethal threat with his playmaking, or even with his shot that, again, back-to-back seasons with 30 goals is very impressive for Mitch. I would have to have him as my MVP, just like he was during the regular season, or many MVPs during the regular season for the Maple Leafs. But again, similar to Matthews, he needed to step up last season. He did, and Marner's going to do the same thing again this time, based on the success that he's had late last season, carried over into the playoffs, and he's just been absolutely dominant this season. So I think he's ready to make a significant impact this time around again.
It's interesting because you picked Austin Matthews to lead the team in scoring, and then you picked Mitch Marner to be the MVP, which means to me that I'm hearing you've got 2 legitimate threats that are going to show up for this series.
Exactly.
And really turn it on. So that's quite interesting. Jim, we heard your prediction for the series. You thought it might be Toronto in 5. I was going to ask predictions to end off the video. Is that where you're sticking? Or are you going to say that this is probably going to be Toronto in 5? What are you thinking?
No, I'm going to stick. I just. Toronto in 5 again. Like I said, I have that feeling again. My MVP for Tampa Bay, if they are going to get beyond, it's going to have to be Vasilevsky. He's going to have to Grant. He's going to have maybe a couple bad games he did last year and rebounded from it, but he's going to have to be the MVP of the whole thing if they're going to get to 7. But I have a feeling it's going to be Toronto in 5.
What about you, Peter? Do you have a prediction out of 7 here? What are you thinking?
I would like Toronto in 6 because if it gets to 7, Vasilevsky is going to shine in those do or die games. That's for sure. But the Maple Leafs were close to clinching it in Game 6, except for that third period collapse where, things didn't go their way. And now that they have the defense and personnel on the back end to try and shut things down a little bit more, plus up front and the forwards to come back and help out and get into the lanes and block shots, I think they're well equipped to do that this time around. So I would say I'm going to go with Toronto 6. I think that's going to be my gut feeling right now.
Well, I'll go off the board since both of you are picking Toronto. I'm going to say Tampa Bay in 7. I know that is not the odds-on favorite here, but I do think that there is this underlying thing in Toronto where there's just the pressure is so high. And there's so many things riding on this series, whether it's coaching with Sheldon Keefe or the GM position with Kyle Dubas, who does not have a contract, a number of players, the underlying what's going to happen with Matthews over the next couple seasons. Like, I think all of that could affect this series. And I if I'm going with the odds, obviously I'm taking Toronto, but just because you both took Toronto, I'm going to go off the board here a little bit. I'm going to say Tampa Bay. I'm going to say in 7. I think this will be a fun series. It should be really interesting. For everybody else watching and listening here, if you're watching on YouTube, put it in the comment section. Let us know what your prediction is. So tell us where you think this series is going to go, who wins it, and in how many, and let us know. Jim, Peter, thank you very much. That's going to do it for our first round preview of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Folks, we got a lot of these coming up. We're going to be doing every single first round series. We're going to make sure that we cover all of these previews. We don't know any of the matchup yet, so we're going to watch the Toronto and Tampa Bay game tonight. We're going to see if the other matchups are solidified this evening, and then we'll have those videos coming to you as well. So stay tuned. Check out the hockeyraiders.com. Both Peter and Jim are putting out great content. Check out their stuff on the website. And for the next series, we look forward to talking to you soon. Take care, everybody.